Hi everyone, Shannon Tipton here, and welcome to the Learning Rebels Coffee Chat, where all the cool L&D peeps hang out. Now, while you're here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future chats. Now, today, the cool kids are talking about how to cultivate workplace community. Now, here's the thing. As L&D professionals, we really are sleeping on the importance of organic communities within our organizations. With the increased adoption of workplace collaboration tools such as Microsoft Teams or Slack, communities are organically taking root in our organizations. And people are moving beyond the four walls of their work teams and they're finding others across departments with whom they share a common interest or a purpose. Now, this means that there's a harvest of information that we can gather and potentially share with others within the business. So, the big question on the table today is multifaceted. How do we find these informal communities? How do we nurture them? And then, how do we manage and share the knowledge that's been gained? So, without further ado, let's get to it. Well, welcome everyone. Learn something new. That's the second time I've said that. Uh, for our coffee chat here this Friday, cultivating workplace communities and taking this from the perspective of we don't own communities, right? We open them up and maybe we tried to build them, but we don't own them. The people own them. And so now what our job becomes is how do we nurture them? How do we support them? How do we curate knowledge that's been shared with them? And how do we then disseminate that knowledge that we've found? Right. So there's a whole lot of components, a whole lot of puzzle pieces that go together when we think about cultivating workplace communities or cultivating learning specifically from workplace communities. How many of you are actively nurturing some community, some sort of community within your workplace right now?
We have a very robust communities of practice that exist at our company. And so I don't actually manage it. We have a knowledge manager that manages it, and they are closely associated with our platform called Jive, where we gather all of our knowledge so that it's searchable and you can find things and ask questions. And it's a social media platform, basically. We're getting ready to switch to a new provider, but um, it's amazing what they get done, because one of the things they do, we're an engineering firm, and so they will create standards for whatever topic that they're talking about. And sometimes they get forms created. They do all kinds of really great things, write papers, have great presentations. It's really pretty cool.
That's great. I love that. So, what do you think your role is in nurturing and supporting that community?
When they come to me for training, I help them with the training, and sometimes it's simply, oh, we need a video edited, or we need help setting up a session on a webinar, or that sort of support is typically the support that I give.
Okay, and that's perfect. I mean, that's exactly what I believe we're here to do. Like I said, we don't own them. And it's not one of those if you build it, they will come sort of things. I find that the best communities are organic within our organizations where naturally people have gravitated together and they're sharing what they're working on or they're sharing common issues. Um, or they're just trying to, have a space for themselves. And the benefit here is that there's all sorts of interesting knowledge that comes out of that.
I think we have too many different garden plots in our organization because there's so many channels that even when they grow up organically, like just people have sometimes they gravitate towards one channel over another, or I don't know. And so sometimes things start out, I mean, like anything else, when you have a really strong sponsor or you have sponsorship in leadership is I think when the best communities thrive and grow. Because I think things they might start out gangbusters, but over time they're not sustained. They're not like they just
Mhm,
lose their
mhm,
momentum or
mhm,
whatever or become less useful to people.
mhm. Yes, so how do we help sustain them? What are your ideas for helping to sustain them?
I think
Well,
what Maureen said about sponsorship is so important because if leadership doesn't sponsor the sharing and the communication and doing things like that, it isn't going to happen. So you could have the best tools set up in the world, but if there's nothing to encourage people to do that, and who encourages them? You know, management has to support that, I think, in one way or another. I mean, there's only so much your HR team or your training team, learning and development, whatever you want to say, can do with that. I mean, you know, I think it all goes back to, again, who is supporting in the organization and how are they supporting it? How are they encouraging it?
Yeah, and I think leadership sponsorship is great and it's important to have those champions. But if you think about organic communities, those are communities of people who have naturally come together. So it's not necessarily, some of them may not necessarily have leadership championship because they didn't need it, right? And so when we think about sustaining them and helping them keep momentum, right? So they've come together and we want to help them keep momentum. What are your thoughts behind that, Kathy?
No, Shannon, one of the things I'm thinking about is, you know, does anybody have examples of what type of community? Like for us, you know, here's a little community of learning and development professionals that we want to learn, but within your own organization, maybe you don't have many learning and development professionals. So do you see communities elsewhere? Because in my mind, are we talking about communities of practice like within an organization? So I'm just kind of curious then, like within an organization, are there communities that they're trying to grow? Is it for maybe customer service people so that team has a community area that they go to learn? Is it management, so there's like a leadership community? I'm just kind of curious what kind of communities within an organization, you know, are established. So if you, like Shannon, you said, if you're trying to do that organically, I mean, how do you kind of start something like that too? You know,
Mhm.
what's the catalyst? What topic or role or issue is a catalyst for forming a community too? I'm just
Mhm.
kind of curious about that.
So at our firm, we organize them by topic, I guess. So for instance, one of them is Bluebeam, which is the PDF reader that everybody uses in our firm. We have another one for Excel. We have another one for fire engineering topics like fire prevention and wind studies. And so it's all by topic. That's how we organize.
Yeah, we have very similar. We have some that are organized by topics, and then we have like a young professionals community that was originally started by an executive sponsor, but has kind of just been, you know, they monitor it and encourage it, but it's really the community of young professionals that are doing it.
I love that idea. So maybe it gets started by leadership or somebody within L&D or somebody else, and then they hand it over and say, okay, I've done my job. I've nurtured the ground. And so now you guys take it over, it becomes yours. And that's where the richest communities are and the ones that are most successful. You know, others, if we start them and we insist on ownership of them, then sometimes that's where they die because people don't feel as though I really have partnership in this. I don't feel like I have, my own unique voice because somebody else is controlling it. Why not be controlled by the group? So I like that, Jason, that they went in that direction. What else do you guys think about this?
Well, one of my problems that I think we run into, I'm in a small organization, so we don't even have enough people that care about getting together. whether virtual or in person. You know, it's not that they don't care about the people, they just don't feel this need to have a community particularly. And if they want to talk to someone, they'll call them or talk to them, you know. So, but when we have had, or I've been in groups, I find that it's, how do we keep it maintained? Like for these chats that you put on, that Rebel Learning put on, a lot of times it's an interest in a topic that keeps me coming back.
Mhm.
So things like that. So I know that topic can definitely, just like Renee said, I think that's probably a very smart way to go, because that's what keeps the interest. However, who keeps it going? Who makes sure that the topics are right? Who takes care of any of that? Because I've never seen anything last for a long period of time. It always kind of, you know, dribbles off to the edge and then kind of stops after a while. So people get tired, people get
Mhm.
tired of doing whatever, and they just stop doing it. So that's kind of one of my concerns, and how to keep it alive, how to keep it so that people want to stay involved.
Well, how about this? What if it's okay if they die?
Some are, I guess.
Right. What if it's okay? The project is done. The project's been completed, or the reason that they've come together has lived its natural life. So now it's time to move on to another community of practice, or something else, you know, within the organization. So I would say that it's okay for it to conclude. Let's not say die. Let's be a little bit more positive. Let's conclude. So it's okay if they close out. Now, if we can help them, what are some ways that we can help sustain? Let's say you do have a strong community of practice of these young leaders, young professionals within your organization, and you just have a standby role. It's like, I know it's happening, and that's great. I'm just kind of keeping my eye on it as an L&D professional. I just want to, you know, see what's happening, keep my eyeballs on it. How could you help keep interest in that moving forward? What do you think you could do?
Shannon, this is Jeff. I work for the National Institute of Corrections. It's a government agency, so sometimes it's difficult to be able to do things. We're handcuffed a lot of times with just what we're able to do. But one of the things we do is we have on our website, we have different networks and communities of practice based on job title or role, if you will. And one of the things that I have kind of found, at least in my division, those communities of practice, network forums, whatever you want to call them, they're only as good as someone tending to them. So we'll post in there, or somebody will post a question and get some feedback, get some answers. But one of the things that we have found is kind of what you said, is as that professional standing by, if it's my group that I'm in charge of, or I'm overseeing that community of practice and I have to approve those posts going in, there's a lot of times where I'll go in and just seed it, and I'll throw something in there to get it talking, because sometimes all these different folks in these different agencies are busy, they're shorthanded, they don't have time to log in. They may have a question, but they're just not going to log in. But if I can seed it and it pops up in their email, they're likely to then go to it and keep the conversation rolling. But if we ignore it, we kind of, as the conversation stated earlier, it dies or it just kind of fizzles out. But if we seed it kind of regularly, it does maintain its momentum, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Similar to drip learning, kind of that. I like
Mhm.
that idea where you just get something that just toggles your brain a little bit and says, oh yeah, that's right. I like to do this. I like to be a part of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Drip community. It's a drip community. Yeah, so we say we're irrigating, right? So if we keep the metaphor alive, we're kind of irrigating the field, you know. And I really appreciate that thought, because they're there for a reason, and like you said, if they're busy, and if you can give them information that's going to help continue the conversation to move forward, why not?
one of the things that we do to help ours is that we have leadership. When they're officially a community of practice, they get, the leader, whoever is leading the group, gets funding for like 2 hours a week to work on their community of practice. So
Oh, okay.
that's 2 hours where they don't have to be on a project. Instead, they're on this. It's still on top of all the other work they do, but at least there's funding for it. And we also have a really active knowledge manager who supports those leaders. He's like, well, try this and do this and that kind of things, so that the community keeps going. And then sometimes they do die away, and sometimes we get new ones. So that it's kind of organic in the way they grow.
One of the natural parts of this is sometimes we, as you know, in the roles that we're in, we get a little anxious. You know, we want to support them, and we want them to continue to go and live and prosper. And we get a little anxious when we don't see that natural momentum happening. And I like what Maureen said. It was Maureen. Yeah, Maureen said in the chat, where the most active communities are those that are generally not directed at work. And I think that's a great way to think about this, is maybe they start off talking about their best barbecue recipes, and then it evolves into something else, right? Inevitably, work's going to creep in. And now how can you create this community where it's okay to talk about how you smoke a brisket alongside how do you project manage something? You know, and then those conversations become even richer. Yeah, and a community manager. Yeah, Chris. So talk a little bit more about that.
One of the things that we've done in the past is notice those communities that have distinct managers or distinct owners that are either trying to get them going or are really good at it. And we bring them together in a community for community owners and give it a space where these people can share. Here's where I struggle, or we haven't really seen engagement. What are you guys doing? And act as partners and help them to build their skills. But the other piece of it is we tout this as a development opportunity. It's a way for people who have knowledge or want to build their networks or want to help others build their network. It could be a development opportunity that they use to learn how to, or to show others, you know, here's how I'm sharing my knowledge. And it's often, if you approach it that way, and whether you're reaching out to people or leaders are saying, hey, we need some more people for running this community, you can talk to them about who might be good for this in terms of this could be a good development opportunity for them. So that also helps too. But having a community for community managers is often quite helpful, because then they will post from, you know, hey, ooh, did you guys see they're having an event, or, you know, this. So it gets them engaged, and everybody wants to help everybody else have a rich. I'm trying to work in a farm metaphor, but I'm lacking.
That's okay. I like that. A community for community managers. That's smart. That's really smart. You know, because I think it goes back to that assumption, you know, where it goes back to that assumption where if you've got you've got the people in the workplace that are really good at doing X, so we're going to have them be trainers.
Mhm.
And they're like, okay, I'm just really good at doing X. I'm not really good at training people. So I think that falls along that same line is, you know, can we provide support? You don't have to put them into a community, but there's one there for them,
Exactly.
you know, that they can take advantage of.
And we also try to tie it back to the real world. So these are skills they can take and use on LinkedIn. You know, and we've had the pets and the, you name it, the foodie community and all of those communities. And we still invite those over because they're doing something that can spark for another group who maybe is an Excel group or, that. And everybody can learn from everybody else, but then tying it back to here's how you might leverage these skills professionally in LinkedIn or in other ways. That's also a really great way to get interest and for people to start to see, oh, this is valuable, both in and out of the organization.
I'm thinking about the comment here that, and it ties in nicely with what you were saying, Chris, this comment here from Maureen, which is, there are going to be people in the organization that are really good at a thing. And how can you tie them in? How can you point them in the direction or point other people into their direction? Right. And so if you've got somebody who is really good, at, let's just throw out project management, somebody's really good at that. Maybe there's, a community around managers or supervisors or other project members, maybe there's something there that could be built, naturally, and say, you guys all should get together because Maureen's really good at this. Have you thought about that? Or you've got somebody else who's really good. In Maureen's example there in the chat is somebody's a really good writer. So they write great blogs. So then how can you take that information and insert it into somewhere else? So there are discoverable things. So if I was going to go to the garden, metaphor, it's like you never know when you're going to find a basil plant in the middle of your tomatoes. So what are you going to do with that? How are you going to make use of it? And so I like that. I like that thought. Another thought that perhaps you might want to consider is when you think about sowing information, or rather nurturing information, what if you popped into different communities and just planted a question? What are you looking for this week? What are you hoping to learn? What are you hoping to achieve? What's your big target this week? And just kind of drop that question in and see where it goes. And encourage the champions that that are in these communities to perhaps ask those sorts of questions, right? Because the whole thing about community is, how do you get them talking? How do you get them sharing? And so now once you've done that and they start sharing, now what? What do you do with some of the information? So somebody shared a great link or an article. Somebody shared a great tool that they found on Google. What do you do with that information?
I usually add it as a favorite, or or I have like a notebook that is about links, favorites, how-to tips, whatever I want to call it, and save them in one place or in a spreadsheet so I can go back to it later.
Mhm.
And then if somebody asks, I can usually, when people do ask stuff, they usually say to me like, oh, if you need to know something, ask Maureen. Cause I'll be like, okay, I just have to know what were my own paths, where I put things. And then I can say, oh, well, I haven't looked at it in a while, but check out this link or something like that.
Mm.
So it's about using, and I think it's a certain amount of vulnerability, but putting out requests on forums. So for us, we use MS Teams, or we have we have different channels, but even if it's just putting it out there, with your own kind of work group or something, say, hey, does anybody know this? Then people generally, as adults, I think we want to help. We want to help others, and we want to help solve a problem. So kind of you can crowdsource then a response and learn a
Mhm.
lot from other people. It's using that community. So I think it is about, as much as I want to incorporate some sort of a community or something into learning experiences, it does require, we want it to be kind of informal but form, it's there's some parameters that we want in there and we hope are in there, but it is about letting go and not having control of something. once it's there. But I just thought about like the drip campaign, and also just thinking from a visual perspective with your gardening analogy is, remember, I don't know about anybody else, but when I remember being in elementary school, grade school, and in clear plastic cups, we planted seeds and we had the soil so that we could see like, ooh, it's sprouting, and we can see the roots there. We can see something coming up. So it's almost like on your drip campaign, you could almost have a visual of like where that seed is in its germination, like where it is in its kind of life cycle. So recognizing then when it's newer, it's going to need maybe like it's going to need daily care until it takes root. And then once it's there, you want the roots to be stronger, but what might you need to prune back on what's above ground so that new growth can occur? Like, just so there's kind of a visual that's in there that recognizes there is a life cycle. And I think the other thing is when things take off, is trying to replicate that may not happen, but like it's knowing when to let it die a natural death. And it's hard. But to make room for new growth, sometimes you have to let the old
Right.
one, you know.
People will move in and out of communities, just like this one. You know, there are people who always show up. There are people who show up by topic. There are people who, if they have the time, they show up. Everybody has value. And then I'm sure there are people who were here at the beginning who outgrew maybe the conversations and they decided to go find something else. It is about, you know, pulling in and looking and being aware of what's happening within these groups. Again, it's not about ownership. It's not about ownership. It's about support. And if you realize that something needs a little extra oomph, can you do that? And can you help point people in the direction? And so when you think about gathering those pieces of information, and so there are some people talking about favorites, putting it in OneNote, etc. And so now that we're noticing that good information is coming out of these communities, we have saved them somewhere. The next logical step is, how do we share that information with the greater good? This community of young professionals has shared a wealth of TED Talks, articles, blogs. You know, we keep it, we favorite it, we think, oh, wow, I looked at that video. That's really sharp. I really like how that worked out. And so now what? Okay, so we've gathered information for ourselves. Now, how do we share that harvest? If we keep to the metaphor, how do we share that harvest with the greater good?
Forums like this help.
Forums like this help. Yes, they do.
Start selling it on a different corner, right?
Start selling it on a different corner.
Right.
Guys,
So
Oh,
ultimately, right, so if you say somebody shared a TED Talk in this forum, if it's relatable in a different forum, why not? And you're talking about germinating it in a different place, why not take that and say, hey, in a different place, this was, and I see it relatable to this group as insert whatever that relation is. And then that way you start to cross pollinate.
and you know, if you're building a larger, you know, formal course or something, you can take these things from what these communities have done, because they're finding the relevant items to the work. So you just say, oh, look, you shared this TED Talk and this is how you guys talked about it. Look, there's all my talking points. There's the examples I want to use. There's the video I want to show during the course. And I can lead that discussion just based off of what, you know, this group talked about, because I already know how that's relatable to what we do.
mhm.
And
I
you
like
get to
it.
play, you get to play off schema that they already have and
Yeah.
build from it. You get to make it relatable to what's back on the job because they've already done that. They've already done the heavy lifting for you.
Mhm.
Excellent, Jason. I love it.
Yeah. And then it just becomes a matter of sharing to the right people in the right place. And Justine, thank you for that. You know, set up a SharePoint site or an intranet page, you know, or a wiki. that links into different groups where they can add the information themselves if they want to, or you can if you find it. So once again, so that you are not doing the heavy lifting, they're doing, to them, it's just a matter of, oh, I've shared this TED Talk in my group. Oh, great. Thanks, Douglas. Now, can you just pop that link over here for me? That would be awesome. And then everybody then has access to it. So I like that. And link directly to posts in communities. Yeah, as part of your learning curriculum. Sure. Why not? So if you are building learning journeys I'll keep with the young professionals, if you're building learning journeys or learning pathways for them, why couldn't you link that?
I'd also challenge everybody to partner with other teams. So this isn't
Yes.
just L&D. Pull your comms people in. Comms and IT are usually the headmasters of a lot of workplace communities, at least in my lives that I've lived in. But pulling in your comms team to also champion this. This is also great with HR in terms of engagement. So what teams can you pull in, but especially the comms team, as you're thinking about intranets, it doesn't have to be us who are doing this. How can you partner with them and work together, whether it's with IT or with comms, to highlight and raise and shine a spotlight on some of the work that's being done in these communities?
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Reach across departments, cross-pollinate. Yeah, keeping IT in your back pocket, in one back pocket, marketing, communications in another back pocket. And now you got two front pockets that you can fill, with operations, sales, HR. Who are the active ones? Salespeople are talking. They are. They're talking somewhere. Where? And how can you, not keep an eye on it from a moderation perspective, but from a knowledge sharing perspective? But where I'd like to go now, if we're thinking about, we've talked about sowing, we've planted the seeds, we've given them, ideas. And another thing that we might consider when we think about sowing information, it might be about giving the community an idea for an activity. So you take those young professionals and you're like, what, I have an idea. Can you guys work on as a group on this particular challenge that I'm seeing, either within our department or within the organization, and planting these thoughtful experiments in their laps and seeing where it goes. Where does that conversation go? And again, nothing moderated, and it's not like homework. It's just here's something that I think that your knowledge as a group, that your wisdom as a group can contribute to. I would love to get your feedback on this. And so now again, we're celebrating the knowledge that this particular group has pulled together. And I think that becomes important. And so how do you make other people aware? There's the other piece of information that I'm curious about, is we're gathering information that's good information, and we're going to share that. We're going to sell it on a different corner. We're going to sell this information on a different corner. Now, how do we make other people aware that we have a little farm stand going on?
Jen, and you were suggesting sort of planting a problem or something that they can work on, but that's one approach. And then you could encourage them to come with the problem that they want to work on. Because it may be something real in their department or in their organization that they need to resolve. And now they've actually got an opportunity to nut it out. So maybe they didn't think about, like, this is a great time for us to talk about this issue.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's a great learning device. Back in the day, we used to call that action learning sets. So you can pull that and use that in communities as well. Am I asking how we become the inflatable bending guy that draws attention to the farm stand? Yes, I am asking that. that you see in front of the used car lots. Yes. How do we become Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Oh, I want a screenshot of everybody doing their imitation of the bendy guy. But how do we become that? But yes, but I like that because Justine, because what that does is maybe what happens is the word gets out that this particular group is working on important projects and maybe other people want to be part of those important projects. You know, that is just open source. It's not, again, it's not something that's been assigned homework or an extra project for you to solve because of your work role. It's just because it's like a hackathon, right? It's a group that has put together this hackathon of how are we going to solve some of the common challenges within the business, and maybe others want to be a part of that. So I love that idea. How do we get it out there?
Well, I think you said it before, Shannon, partnering with marketing, HR, comms, IT, everybody, and just being the voice and saying, hey, look what these people are doing over here. Just look what they're doing.
Mhm.
And just driving people's attention to it. If there's a monthly newsletter that goes out to the company, find a way to highlight it. If you're doing a podcast about something, interview the community manager or some of the participants and talk about what
Great
they're doing.
idea.
Just be a voice for them and plug them anywhere you can. You really are. You are the flailing arm guy in front of the car lot.
I'd say to tag off Chris's comment, if you're walking down the virtual hallway, like where's everybody hanging out? Where's the water cooler at? Right. I don't want to set up my stand and do the whole, if a tree falls and nobody's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. I want people to hear the sound. So go to where the people are and the foot traffic is. So if you see a community or communities that are more active than others, well, that would be your place to try to seed to take up more acreage, so to speak.
We can be the voice for the community. We can share their, something important that happened within their group, or feature them on a podcast, feature them on a newsletter, kind of like an announcement that says, hey, did you know? ... And I would say that it might be smart to ask permission before shouting it from the rooftops, because maybe they're, if it's for young professionals and you got somebody who's, not under 40, and maybe you want to shout that out, maybe you got to have a special message that goes along with it, right? If you are, don't just pop in, there are criteria or what have you. So just be careful, but it's really important that we become their, amplifier, I guess. Is that the right word? That we amplify their voice, that we're the advocate in some cases, or the champion in others. Now that you have information and we've got some mechanisms from which to share it, now it's a matter of wash, rinse, repeat, and going off and finding other groups of people, finding out what they're doing, finding out what they're sharing. And so now let me ask you this: how are you discovering, how can we discover new plots of lands for which to build our gardens, or to continue nurturing our gardens?
On Yammer, and that's where I've sort of discovered workplace communities on Yammer, or Workplace, or any of the social networks. And then also on the intranet sites, you see who comments on, video or things that people have posted. So just keeping your ears open. But I think if people see the value in a community, they will keep coming back to it. And like you say, the value may go over time, and that's okay. Then the community, has served its purpose, and it may be reinvigorated in the future. But yeah, where I was before at the bank, there were like loads of communities, and I just got so much value out of them, particularly over lunchtime sessions and all that I just kept going back. And meeting people from across the organization.
I think the message here is getting out of our own space, and we can say that metaphorically or in reality. That maybe you're back in the office and you've got the four walls of your office, and you're the type of person that goes from the car park to the office and maybe to lunch, then back to the car park and then home. And maybe your conversations happen either in this sort of forum or maybe on Slack or Teams or what have you, but you don't really leave your space. What would happen if you left your space? Remember those days when we gathered around the coffee machine, right? And we had the break rooms where we talked to people and where you discovered what was happening. Hallway talks. Now, I used to pop out of my office whenever I saw somebody walking down the hallway. Hey, how's it going? I think that's why they avoided my office now that I look at that in retrospect. But it worked. And then when you think now, if you're working from home or if you're in a hybrid situation, how do we talk to people randomly and find out what's happening out in the world? So yeah, Chris, let me flip this over. So Chris, how would you suggest that if we work in this hybrid or virtual area, how are communities then discoverable?
So if you hear purring, somebody's trying to say something. I don't know what she's trying to say. Obviously, she's not camera shy. So, some of the keys are, especially in a hybrid environment, you have to make sure that people are putting things in places where everybody has access to. So everybody's leveraging Yammer or Teams or Workplace or whatever you have. And then it's a matter of getting people comfortable, regardless of where they're working, of not just walking physical hallways if they're in the office, but walking the digital hallways. And all that is scanning the news feeds. So just like you would scan your news feed in LinkedIn, making it a practice to scan not just the communities you belong to, but actually scanning what's happening and what's being posted, what's trending in whatever tools you use. So for me, that was Workplace by Facebook. So it was doing not a scan just of my communities and my notifications, but for me, it was scanning, what are people talking about? What's bubbling up? Where are the concerns? Where are that's a new community. And that just was part of my day. And I think it needs to be part of a lot of people's day, and more so than are probably doing it now.
I love it. Digital hallways. I think we should all steal that phrase. That's a good one. But yeah, I mean, if you've got people hanging out on Teams, go into the feed and read. And even better, where appropriate, contribute. Not take over, but contribute a little bit, and at first it might be contributing to different networks in small ways, such as, oh, help me understand that, or where did you find that link, or something small. And then you can build up if you want to really be a part of the conversation. Then you start small and then you can build up so people don't feel as though you're intruding. Really about creating cohesiveness. It's about sharing conversation. And, setting it up so that people keep wanting to come back and being part of the conversation. And I'll say it again, for those who came in late or for those who are listening later, it's not a matter of ownership. It's a matter of contribution. It's a matter of celebrating that people are sharing important knowledge with each other and with the greater community. And the more that we can celebrate that, the better off we're going to be and the stronger the community is going to be. Almost de facto, right? We're at the top of the hour. So does anyone have any additional thoughts they want to share about this conversation?
Well, what Chris just said and Justine just said, building on, work this into onboarding and these communities. It made me think, like at Christmas, to limit the number of gifts is to say, like, what is one thing you want, one thing you need, one thing you wear, and one thing you read. So like you're kind of like, what are the equivalents for that I could have new hires exploring on their own? So it's not prescriptive, but it's getting them used to searching on their own and seeing there's a wealth of information. But it can be things that are useful for them. So maybe it's a community that's just fun, and one that's related to their work, and one that's related to culture or something. And then I don't know then, but like just for them to think about, like, again, reaching out, and maybe there's some actions that are associated with that, like to follow a community or do something, but that it's meaningful to them.
I like that. It's a great way to end the conversation. So thank you for those thoughts. All right. Thank you, everyone. This was a lot of fun. And it was a really great conversation to have about the importance of being able to bring communities to life within our workplaces. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us for another Learning Rebels Coffee Chat. To carry our pun-filled chat forward, there were a lot of seeds planted today. We sowed many different ideas, and the possibilities for supporting informal communities are rich. Now, to answer the big questions that were on the table, how do we first find those communities? Well, simply talk across departments. You ask, you listen. Your salespeople are having conversations somewhere. See if you will be allowed into the party. How can we gather information to keep knowledge alive in our businesses was another question. Well, try to correlate information into a tool like OneNote, or build a wiki based on the community in order to share links and resources and tips. A big part of our conversation was, how can we help communities to thrive? Well, mostly be a champion for them and listen to their needs. Find places to assist, not to take over and not to moderate, but to help where help is needed. Lastly, how can we really help these communities grow? Well, it's important to be a voice for them. As we said in the chat, be that inflatable, wavy man you see in front of the car dealerships, right? Communities don't grow unless someone is talking about them. Now, right now, our responsibility is to walk that digital hallway and to find where organizational knowledge is thriving. So it's time to roll up your sleeves and be prepared to start cultivating your organizational community gardens. You want to join us live? And you know you do. Go on over to learningrebels.com and sign on up. In the meantime, stay curious, be rebellious, and take over the world. Bye for now.